Alright, guys, so today we'll be talking about Mali, a case study of climate change and conflict. My name is Wes Thompson. I'm from the School of Policy and International Affairs at the University of Maine, and this was recorded in the fall of 2015. So today we're going to be talking about Mali, which is a country here in the Sahel. The Sahel is a it's kind of this fuzzy region in the crown of Africa. Some people consider it to be these four countries. Some people consider it to be a region right here. But this is kind of generally the agreed upon definition of the Sahel. This is more of a political map, and now if we shift over towards an environmental map, we can really see what the Sahel is all about. The Sahel is this kind of transition region between the desert up here in the north and the subtropical region of the south, and kind of represents the meeting of two worlds coming in from the Arabic north and the more African south. Mali has a population of about 17 million. Of that 17 million, about 10% of the population is nomadic, while about 80% of the population is engaged in farming and fishing. So this is a big percentage of the population we're talking about today. Farmers. So while most Malians are farmers, about 50% of the Mande are farmers, or rather, 50% of the farmers are Mande. Um, the Voltaics are also in there, the Shanghai, and these represent again about 80% of the population. They grow primarily cotton, millet, rice, corn, vegetables, and peanuts, both for subsistence and for export. So this is a big part of the Malian economy. The nomads, they're primarily concentrated in the north, in this Azawad region here. Azawad is the primarily Islamic region of the north. It isn't obviously a recognized country, but it is more or less its own sovereign state, primarily inhabited by the Tuaregs here. They're a more traditional pastoral community known for their kind of long, flowing, beautiful blue robes as seen here. They're primarily herders, and they herd cattle, sheep, and goats in this more of a traditional lifestyle. The Sahel, including Mali, has this really growing population. This light blue line here is the population of Mali, and in 1990 it was a population of about 8 million, and that's more than doubled to almost 20 million in 2014. I'm right, to 15 million in 2014. So this is a really quickly growing population. I mean, look at, for example, Sudan, which is in the easternmost of the Sahel. 1990, 20 million people, all the way up to almost 40 million people in 2014. That's near double. Absolutely incredible. One of the biggest problems facing Mali is desertification. This growing population I just showed, combined with this traditional Tuareg lifestyle of pastoralism, has really led to overgrazing in this kind of classic Hardin's tragedy of the commons. And it really is tragic as the land has become overgrazed. There's not enough grasslands for this kind of traditional lifestyle of herding. This is coupled with climate change. As we can see here, this is a map of rainfall anomalies between 1900 and 2010, and this really shows a really drastic pattern of rainfall for the Sahel. If we see here, starting in the the late 60s, we have a massive drought that's really devastated much of the region. We're having deficits of 4 centimeters a month in the mid 80s, and for a region that really doesn't get much rainfall to begin with, that's really dramatic. So, something to look out for. This is a map of rainfall anomalies from 1961 to 2013, and again here we have this massive drought in the 80s that really hasn't recovered to pre-1960 levels, which are kind of indicated here at the far left. So this drought is ongoing, although it seems to have recovered from the worst part, this massive dip here in the mid-80s. So this brings us to our question of conflict. This is really a question of land usage between farmers and herders, really to see who gets the land. My hypothesis here is that there's a direct correlation between rainfall and conflict in the Sahel. Less rainfall means less desirable land, more competition. This less rainfall meaning that there's not as much agricultural land for farmers, and there's also not as much grassland for the traditional Tuaregs who are raising primarily herds for their own sustenance. So our case study here is the Mopti region of Mali. It's kind of right here in the central region. It's both a city and a region, and it represents a crossroads um, between southern Mali and northern Mali, and it's traditional markets on Thursday. So if you want to pick up some of those beautiful blue robes that we were looking at earlier, and also visit the Grand Mosque of Mopti, which is a gorgeous representation of Islamic architecture mixed with African tradition. So the data set we'll be looking at here is from the Regional Court of Appeals in Mopti. This data was collected between 1992 and 2009, and is broken down between conflicts within and between herders, farmers, and interestingly enough, fishermen. So we'll be kind of analyzing that data today across rainfall anomalies. So here we're looking at total disputes. This red line represents the total number of disputes that were brought up in the Court of Appeals mapped against rainfall anomalies. And we're not really looking at anything significant here. Oddly enough, we look at an increased level of rainfall in 2002 and 2003, and actually looks like that disputes went up in 2004, which is odd to look at. Here we're looking at conflict between farmers and herders. As we can see here, there's actually a dramatic increase in rainfall between 1993 and 1994, and in 1995, conflict between herders and farmers has dropped significantly. So that kind of creates an interesting narrative for us, going along with our hypothesis that we set out earlier, that this is what we should see. We should see that increased rainfall will bring about less conflict between these two groups. Again, this is what we see. We see the same thing in 1999 and conflict in 2000, 2001, 2002. We see a decreased amount of rainfall, a pretty significant decreased amount of rainfall in 2001, 2002, and we see a spike in conflict in 2003. Obviously, the rain lags a year behind, kind of growing patterns of the grasslands. Here we're looking at conflict between herders and other herders mapped against rainfall. Not really a whole lot to look at here. This is like kind of mostly noise. Interestingly enough, we see that more rain here in 1993, 1994 means a kind of a spike here in conflict between herders. And now we're looking at conflict between farmers, kind of farmers fighting each other, or at least going to court against one another. As we can see here, there is an increase in rainfall in 2002, 2003, and actually, surprisingly, conflict goes up in 2004. And again, we're looking at 2008, we see this kind of slight decrease in rainfall, and in 2009, conflict plummets significantly rather. So for those of you who are interested in statistical results, I have that for you here, and this includes fishermen data, which I did not present to you graphically earlier. And I plug this data into the program R, and that's the sound of me doing math. We get these statistical values. So returning to our earlier hypothesis of violence of farmers versus herders, we have a p-value of 0.23. Now, what does this mean? This means that there's a 25% chance of what we're looking at here as being just noise, just random kind of happenstance, coincidence, whatever you want to call it. But that also means there's about a 75% chance that rainfall and conflict is correlated, which, for a lot of statisticians would mean, well, that's not a really great significant result. But really, when we're looking at social sciences, this is not bad. We're looking at a strong correlation between the two. So this is not a great p-value. However, conflict is fickle. There's lots of other variables that lead up to conflict, lots of other factors. So there is definitely something here, statistically speaking. There's a 75% chance of what we're looking at here is not random noise, that in fact rainfall does really impact the relationship between farmers and herders. So what does this mean? We can expand this research out to the rest of the Sahel, including Sudan, where the population is absolutely booming, and we can see similar patterns there between agriculturalists and pastoralists and the conflict happening there. I'm really interested in looking at perhaps Ethiopia and Kenya, Somalia, those regions where there's also these big um, kind of divides between herders and farmers. And we can also further expand this into the Middle East, uh, where climate change has certainly affected war in terms of Syria and Iraq. So thank you for listening to this presentation. I hope you enjoyed yourself, and thank you for paying attention to the Sahel. It's a really interesting region, and I hope I kind of sparked your interest in it a little bit more. Thank you.